A Mexican mafia called La Aime was born in American prisons. In 1957, in a prison in the California town of Tracy, the young criminal Luis Flores, nicknamed Light-Skinned Bison, was serving a sentence for murder. At that time, Mexicans represented a small group of prisoners in all correctional institutions of the country. Most belonged to whites and African Americans, constantly at odds with each other due to racial hatred. Both sides did not recognize Mexicans as people. Bison realized that within the American prison system, in order to survive, it was necessary to unite. As a slogan, he chose the nationalist ideal "We are all Mexicans." For lack of a better example, he tried to copy organizational principles from the most powerful Italian mafia in the world. Initially, even the name of the gang turned out to be borrowed from immigrants from Sicily. The Black Hand was the name of one of the most famous Italian gangs operating in America. The palm print symbol was immediately adopted for distinctive tattoos. In Spanish, the name sounded like La Mano Negro. From the first days of its existence, the Mexican gang accepted a strict condition for all its members. You can only enter into it. There was no way out. Only the dead. The punishment for apostates is only death. Bison attracted only Mexican prisoners who distinguished themselves by ferocious cruelty. In the vast majority of murderers, they were needed to introduce animal laws into the prison environment. Russian prisoners call such characters reckless, and even more understandable thugs. Between themselves, the Mex called themselves carnals, which means brothers. As befits a family, the carnals abandoned the strict hierarchy within the community, preferring to equality and mutual respect based on blood. Even the founder of La Mano Negro, Luis Flores, did not enjoy the special privileges of a godfather. Only with the help of cruelty a small group of Latinos quickly forced all the other prisoners to reckon with them. Opponents were killed, most often in front of everyone. The reason could be a careless word, an oblique look, or any household trifle. In 1961, new trends reached the San Quentin prison, where the most dangerous criminals were traditionally kept. At that time, the Mexican prison community was barely 50 people. The Latinos in San Quentin made an important step towards national identity. They abandoned any analogy with the Italian mafia and renamed the gang. For the symbol, they chose the letter M, meaning Homeland Mexico. In Spanish, the new name was pronounced La Aime and carried the Spanish-Mexican spirit of the gang. The abbreviation X3 has become a new symbol. This is the serial number of the letter M in the Latin alphabet, the number 13. Soon, when La Aime will try to extend its influence beyond the prison to California cities, the walls of many houses will be painted with similar signs. The turning point in the history of La Aime was in 1968, when 39-year-old criminal Joe Morgan, nicknamed Wooden Leg, joined her. He had a prosthesis. Although he was a half-breed, the Mexicans readily accepted him as a new member of the gang. From the age of 17 he was in San Quentin for murder. Wooden Leg had Yugoslav roots. This helped him find a common language with another influential group, the Aryan Brotherhood, consisting entirely of whites. The two gangs have entered into a non-aggression pact that has been in effect for half a century. Moreover, in the days of turmoil, the Aryans and Mexicans invariably stood up for each other. Another undertaking by Morgan, even more successful for decades, was the reorientation of Mexican criminals from theft and robbery to the drug trade. Wooden Leg turned out to be a good businessman and organizer. His main assistant was the young Mexican Ramon Mundo Mendoza, who ended up in San Quentin for murder in 1969. The first experience gained in the wild, Mendoza replenished with several brutal murders in the prison itself. He usually wielded a machete. The fear of the close-knit and bloodthirsty Mexicans in San Quentin was already so great that the administration, with all its desire, could not find witnesses. According to Mendoza, he killed a little less than a dozen convicts in San Quentin. At the same time, an intensive recruitment began for a previously small gang of new recruits. Under Morgan and Mendoza, the formation of Mexican concepts and rights was finally completed. Publicity in belonging to La Aime for any person was punishable by death. The Mexicans wholeheartedly rejected the arrows. No person, no problem. A simple principle relieved them of the need to negotiate and negotiate. When La Aime set up a drug dealer network in California, they gave heroin dealers one choice: either work for the Mexicans or die. It has always worked flawlessly. Members of La Aime were forbidden any cooperation with the authorities, whether in prison or at large. For the jam they did not give over the ears, but immediately killed. They didn't have crackers. In La Aime the way was closed for weaklings, or at least once demonstrated their cowardice. In prisons, the gang placed its plenipotentiaries block arrows, very similar in function to domestic watchers. The code of conduct for Mexican bandits did not apply to members of their families. Moreover, their relatives were not to be held accountable for the sins of their parents. Dino Moreno, a former member of the gang, who continued to call himself such and even out of habit collected tribute from drug dealers, was waiting for retribution for betrayal for 12 years. The killers who came to his house, in a fit of zealous fulfillment of the task, killed the whole family of the disobedient, including children. Aime punished them with death for abuse of authority and violation of laws. Admission of a new member to the gang was possible only with the unanimous approval of the candidacy. In the compositions of tattoos, the Mexicans turned to ancient history, borrowing from the Aztec culture. Images of eagles, snakes, Aztec calendars and ancient warriors appeared on the bodies of members of Aime. For secret communication among themselves, the Mexicans introduced the language manual, which was completely incomprehensible to white policemen. In 1975, Joe Morgan and Ramon Muno Mendoza would be released from San Quentin on parole. Their fate will be different. Morgan will die a convinced crime boss, and Mendoza will repent and become the first high-ranking defector from Aime to the camp of American justice. He will reveal a lot of the history and secrets of the Mexican Mafia. His testimony will be included in the indictments for 36 episodes from the activities of Aime. America will apply the Witness Protection Program to him, safely hiding him, and retribution will bypass him. The baton from Morgan and Mendoza and San Quentin will be taken by Eddie Gonzalez, nicknamed Yun. From a prison already unreservedly ruled by Mexican strictures, he will successfully attempt to launch an elaborate drug distribution system across California. The goal was to ensure that the Mexican drug cartels had an uninterrupted supply of raw materials and to remove competitors from the market. Both goals were successfully achieved. All those who disagreed with the monopoly of Aime quickly died not by their own death. Yun humorously called the process of forming a sales network preaching the gospel. The commercialization of the gang's activities led to the fact that all its further activities were aimed at making money. The true heyday of Aime came in the 90s. The police proved unable to deal with the well-oiled structure. For the members of Aime, the prison became a home, and from there they successfully managed the activities of a huge organization. In addition to the profitable resale of drugs, the organization imposed a tribute on all dealers operating in the controlled territory. Heroin, traditional for Mexicans, was replenished with South American cocaine, and even further with amphetamines, which satisfied the taste preferences of all users of the potion. The struggle to expand the habitat has become a paramount task for the gang. The Californian, Oregonian and Hawaiian divisions appeared in Aime. It is in these states that most people from Mexico live. In those years, Aime tried to make everyone speak respectfully about themselves. For the wrong presentation of facts from the life of the Mexican Mafia, the gang destroyed all the consultants of the film American Aime. Another Latin American gang, La Familia, lost 2 fighters who inadvertently publicly let out flat jokes about the Mexicans. The American state was forced to throw huge forces and means to stop the activities of the Mexican Mafia, but the final victory is still far away. At Aime, there is a constant flow of new recruits who replace those who end up in prison, where criminals feel great. They, as it were, temporarily change their place of work, and their families regularly receive the wages of the heads of families. There is no need to talk about a crisis in the ranks of the organization. The gang just went even deeper underground. Another thing in Russia, the romance of pickpockets is a thing of the past. The strict, almost monastic way of life of the thieves-in-law of previous generations looks like an atavism. The title itself is sold for money and gradually becomes a good investment on the way to success in business, devaluing archaic concepts. In the 90s, the black authorities in the zones clashed with ordinary bandits who did not recognize the former authorities. Now the situation is even more complicated. In prisons, Jomanots proliferate, living according to their own laws, and not favoring either thieves or bandits. There has come a clear crisis of the thieves' ideology, and there is no vacuum in nature. The empty space must be filled with something. The eyes of the seekers may fall on the experience of the Mexicans.